This morning, President Donald Trump sent out a Truth Social post to Vladimir Putin, demanding that he make a deal to end the war in Ukraine, or else. Now, the or else, according to Donald Trump, would be taxes, tariffs, and sanctions on Russia. So it's worth reading exactly what Trump wrote on Truth Social to kind of get a better understanding of how he is approaching this issue. Because remember, one of his big promises was that he was gonna end the war in Ukraine on day one. Now, obviously that didn't happen on day one. Obviously, after he made that statement, he just kind of backtracked a little bit to lower expectations, which I think was the right thing to do. There's no way you're gonna end a big war like this on day one. But nonetheless, this is what he posted on Truth Social, saying that I'm not looking to hurt Russia. I love the Russian people and always had a very good relationship with President Putin. And this, despite the radical left's Russia, Russia, Russia hoax. We must never forget that Russia helped us win the Second World War, losing almost 60 million lives in the process. Okay, Soviet era Russia absolutely did help beat the Nazis. I mean, they played a pivotal role in beating the Nazis, so he's right about that. But we'll take a moment to note that we're not sure where he got that 60 million figure from, because according to the National World War II Museum, the Soviet Union lost 24 million soldiers and civilians in World War II. Whatever, that's just a side note, but let's get to the rest of his statement. He says, all of that being said, I'm going to do Russia, whose economy is failing, and President Putin a very big favor. Settle now and stop this ridiculous war. It's only going to get worse. If we don't make a deal, and soon, I have no other choice but to put high levels of taxes, tariffs, and sanctions on anything being sold by Russia to the United States and various other participating countries. Let's get this war, which never would have started if I were president, over with. We can do it the easy way or the hard way. And the easy way is always better. It's time to make a deal. No more lives should be lost. So obviously the Biden administration has already implemented economic sanctions against Russia for their role in invading Ukraine. We're gonna revisit that and kind of compare that to what Trump is suggesting here. But this messaging is interesting because obviously the media's coverage of Donald Trump and his relationship with Vladimir Putin has been pretty critical. He's been very friendly to Putin, and so obviously that led to allegations that Russia might have colluded with Donald Trump to help him win the 2016 presidential election. There hasn't been any, evidence of that. But lately, Trump's tone has changed a little bit. For instance, yesterday he stated that Putin should make a deal. I think he's destroying Russia by not making a deal. And he also said he can't be thrilled. He's not doing so well. I mean, he's grinding it out. It's not making him look very good. I think he would be well off to end that war. So look, the good news is Trump is very clearly motivated to end this war, and he is issuing threats against Vladimir Putin, and I think that's the right person to issue threats against. Yesterday, Trump also said that he believes Volodymyr Zelensky is more open to making a deal, but he doesn't think or doesn't know whether Vladimir Putin is. When Trump was inaugurated, Putin stated that he was open to dialogue with the United States about the war, saying that I want to emphasize that its goal should not be a brief truce, but a lasting peace based on respect for the legitimate interests of all people, which is rich coming from the guy who invaded Ukraine. But Trump has infamously claimed that he could end the Ukraine-Russia war in 24 hours. He has already missed that deadline, but he has admitted that a deal will take a little bit of time. Let's take a look at that.
The real conversations will start on the 20th, but we had a really good conversation, and I think we're gonna be in a good place in the Middle East. I think the Middle East will be in a good place. I think actually more difficult is going to be the Russia-Ukraine situation. I see that as more difficult.
When you say
I don't think they should have allowed missiles to be shot 200 miles into Russia. I think that was a bad thing. And that brought the Koreans in, North Korea.
It does seem that Trump wants to get a deal, get a deal through as quickly as possible, so that's good news. But it's worth noting that Trump is pushing for peace because he's responding to the will of his base, his voters. His voters no longer want to fund the war in Ukraine. They no longer want to have any US involvement in that conflict, and they want it to end. And so he made that promise to his voters, and it's clear that he intends on keeping that promise. Now, whether or not his strategy here is gonna work remains to be seen, but I do want to just show you this clip from last year because I think it's still relevant today. Take a look at this.
The young men that I have been talking to in particular, they don't hate Kamala Harris. They actually like her in certain ways. They just say they think the world was better and safer under Donald Trump. The economy was healthier. One other thing that keeps coming up too, that you don't hear a lot about in the national media, Dana, is a lot of young men are worried about global conflict because they are of draft age. That comes up over and over and over again in conversations that I've been having over the last few weeks.
I thought that insight from Peter Hamby was so valuable. That conversation took place during the election cycle, and I really wish Democrats listened, but they didn't. Donald Trump, on the other hand, has been listening to his supporters. And when he says he's gonna carry out a promise, sometimes he doesn't follow through. But in this case, to me, it's clear that he does want to follow through. Biden had not spoken to Vladimir Putin, I mean, in almost 3 years when he left office. And you need to have those difficult conversations and find a way to forge peace negotiations, peace deals in order to end that war. Meanwhile, as Ryan Grimm very effectively argued last year, Democrats suffered in the election because they had the optics of caring more about foreign wars than Americans here at home.
People see America first. They read it as xenophobic and anti-immigrant, but Trump's supporters scan it as a promise not to waste money on wars and nation building while our own country crumbles. But the critique in that slogan, and expressed by that Charlemagne caller, makes an emotional link between issues that are treated as disparate and distinct by political operatives. The jarring price swings at the grocery store and at the pump, combined with the out-of-control wars and the surge of migrants at the border, combined to produce a visceral sense that our leaders in Washington were sacrificing the needs of regular people here in the United States. People's sense that the economy was being handled poorly by Biden was colored by the chaos overseas, and his rapt attention to Ukraine and Israel left little room for confidence that he cared what was going on back here. By pretending that the US could do it all, but then only delivering on the foreign wars, Democrats set up ordinary people to view it as a zero-sum competition.
I think that statement from Ryan Grimm is so on point, and I do think that this hurt Democrats in this past election cycle. Look, say what you will about Donald Trump, and obviously we've been critical of him. Obviously I have my problems with him, but he tends to understand where the hearts and minds of his voters are far better than the Democrats do when it comes to their own voters. And they need to wake up to that fact, because if they don't, they're gonna keep losing elections. But nonetheless, just checking in on this devastating war in Ukraine. I mean, thousands of people have been killed as a result of this war. It needs to end. I don't care if it's the Democrats who succeed in ending it or the Republicans who succeed in ending it, it needs to end. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in December said that 43,000 Ukrainian soldiers have been killed in action, and an additional 370,000 have been wounded. Zelensky also said Ukraine estimated that 198,000 Russian soldiers have been killed and more than 550,000 have been wounded. Now, circling back to Donald Trump's threat to Vladimir Putin, which came in the form of additional tariffs and sanctions. As I mentioned earlier, yes, it is true that Biden has implemented sanctions against Russia, and they haven't worked. Russia has continued on with this war in Ukraine with no end in sight. However, there is one area in which Trump seems to be threatening Putin where Biden was kind of unwilling to do so. So this might make the difference. I don't know for sure, but here's what it's about. So the Trump administration seems more willing to go after Russia's energy sector, which the Biden administration also did to some extent, but in a very limited manner. During the confirmation hearing to be Trump's Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent last week told Congress that he would be 100% on board for taking sanctions up, especially on the Russian oil majors, to levels that would bring the Russian Federation to the table. Now, while Russia has thus far been able to basically circumvent Western sanctions, Business Insider reports that Russia's economy is in fact starting to slow, with inflation rising rapidly in the country. Only time will tell whether Trump will both make good on these threats and if these economic threats move the needle in regard to where Vladimir Putin stands on the continuation of this war in Ukraine. So we'll see if this is a tactic that works. But I'm glad that Trump at least realizes that ending a war doesn't happen in 24 hours. It's a complicated situation and you do need both parties to agree to it. And I'm also happy that he's realized that Putin is a lot more difficult to work with than Zelensky is on this matter. So we'll see how it plays out. We'll definitely follow the story. This war absolutely needs to end and I hope it does.
If you enjoyed this video, that's because of our members. They make us independent, they make us strong, and they make us honest. Become a member today by hitting the join button below.